Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to welcome you once again to our in-person session day together. Wasn't that keynote with Nicholas just so inspiring and powerful again? I want to introduce myself. I'm Carol Wilson. I'm the Lunder Education Chair here at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which is housed in this beautiful historic building that we're in today, along with our partner museum, the National Portrait Gallery. And really, we're just so thrilled to share not only this summit with you, but our collections with you. And I hope you have some time to explore the galleries today. Our galleries truly, come alive when we have educators such as yourselves animating our spaces with your experiences and your thoughts and your expertise, and together making meaning of the objects in our collection, finding ways to connect them with your teaching and to make them relevant for your students' lives. And I hope that you'll find time to visit our Fighters for Freedom exhibition upstairs, which features an interpretive wall amplifying student voices from across the country as young people share with our visitors who inspires them by fighting for justice today. So my education team here at SAM is also presenting six sessions at the summit, so we've been very busy preparing for you on topics ranging from science and art, conservation, to taking civic action, to inclusive pathways for exploring art and history. But right now, on this stage, we're going to be joined by a panel of 3 State Teachers of the Year, which we're really excited about, in a longstanding partnership with the Council of Chief State School Officers, now celebrating its 18th year. The Smithsonian has welcomed State Teachers of the Year to join us here in Washington, D.C. for professional development, and we often rely on their expertise continually to inform our work in education for a national PK-12 audience. So in this session, our panelists will share how their students are exploring global challenges and activating local solutions in their own communities. So representing Minnesota, Tennessee, and North Dakota, would you please help me welcome State Teachers of the Year, Natalia Benjamin, Melissa Collins, and Ivana Tordorovich.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Awesome. We are very excited to be here today. My name is Natalia Benjamin, and I'm the 2022 Minnesota State Teacher of the Year. And we're going to introduce ourselves just really briefly so that you can get a little bit of a glimpse of where our entry point is to this work. I taught at the high school for 8 years with multilingual learners and also ethnic studies. I was born and raised in Guatemala and moved to the United States to attend the university and then ended up staying. And so the work that I do is really centered in having our students' voices uplifted and also really supporting them in how to address some of the issues they see in their communities. And so I'm going to let our other panelists introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Melissa Collins. I'm a second grade teacher at John P. Freeman Optional School in Memphis, Tennessee. I am passionate about global learning, STEAM education, and teacher leadership. The students that I teach are predominantly Black. And being in Memphis, there is high poverty in our community, but we still have high expectations for our students, and they have high expectations for themselves. So working in that community where I was raised, I have high hopes and dreams for my students, and I teach them through community involvement and making a difference right there in their community in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, I have to say, first of all, I'm a survivor. My name is Ivana Todorovic, and I'm a refugee from Bosnia. The things that I'm really passionate, since I'm multilingual learners teacher, and now actually going into a new position as a program director in my district, well, of course, my passion is language and language learning, academic language learning, but also very passionate about human rights on a global level, identity issues and topic, preserving language and culture with my kids, my students. I call them my kids because they are. And then also teaching them to be everyday leader. Because that definition of a leader doesn't mean that you have to actually be a CEO to be a leader. So those are kinds of things that we are working on in my classroom. I know that my students and I challenge the old narratives and how, with a very productive dialogue and also having hard conversations with the ones that they don't want it, but once they are included in hard conversations, they see actually that we have more in common than we are different. So overall, protecting humanity.
Thank you for sharing that. Protecting humanity is so important, I think, especially in our day-to-day interactions with people. And as we think of how our students can see themselves as innovative change makers, let's talk a little bit about what being a change maker means. What does being a change maker means to you guys?
When I think about being a change maker with my students, first I have to think about what have I done to be a change maker and try to model that for my students by telling them if something is not right, you have to be able to advocate for that and you have to be solution oriented. So when I think about change maker, I think about the importance of changing what's going on in your community. What do you need to change to make the world better? And how you can inspire others to want to impact change with you. Because you cannot do this work in silos. You have to be able to engage others in important work.
Thank you. What do you think about change makers, Ivana?
You know what, I agree with Melissa. It's so easy to go first, you know? So anyway, but I just say, I would add to her is that you need to be present. We need to teach our children, our students, to be present and to be aware of these things that are going around them. You know, just asking, hey, did you, and not necessarily watching news every day, but like, do you know what happened yesterday? Did you catch it? Because they're on social media all the time, especially I'm working with high schoolers. Moving them towards the positive change, but like she said, problem solving and then finding solution. I do think as a change maker, you have to use your heart and your mind together. Because you cannot care about an issue or a problem if you don't empathize, if you're not passionate about something, if you don't see the problem of it that actually affects everyone, not just me or you. And then including life experiences. Sometimes we have these students that are coming and we have to really learn the story behind them and see what is actually a good thing that you're bringing. What are the strengths that you're bringing? You might not know ABC, you might not know how to speak English, but in Ethiopian refugee camp, you actually grow lemons and oranges and you burned your tent twice, but still survived. Can you imagine that? When you're 7 years old, that kid can do so much. And he did. So those are kinds of things that we need. And of course, like I said, we have to be courageous. It's not hard to be a change. It's not easy to be hard change maker. So courage and empathy is needed.
So a lot of our experiences, right, inform how we show up in the world. And I love that you're using the words leadership and humanity in their heart. And I think oftentimes when we think of how do we seek solutions, right, and problem solve, we put our head to work, right? There's a lot of intellectual, academic work, research, and all these pieces when we're trying to find solutions. And yet, leading with the heart is so important, and being mindful that those two things are intertwined and they come together. And it can be intimidating to be a change maker, to point out a problem and then to find those solutions. And Melissa, you work with really young people, and sometimes we underestimate maybe the power that our young learners can have. Can you share a little bit about how you work with your second graders to take on this amazing work?
Yes. Even though they are young, I've really recognized how my students can be advocate. And my work is always to be a facilitator and center my classroom around their voices, right? And so I've engaged them in several ways with how to be a leader, as you discussed, and how to be empathetic, right? And so when I think about, we engaged in this climate action project several years ago. And that's a great project to look up. Millions of teachers and students are engaged in that work, led by Corin Timbers in Belgium. And I work with a couple colleagues. So you heard me talk about can't do this work in silo. You have to be able to collaborate and network with others. And so I end up working with a colleague, Michael, in New Jersey. And we did our climate project and we presented to each other, which was great hearing small minds come up with solutions on how to help with climate change. But I want to say this, after we end up getting off the call, Mike and I had a debrief, one-on-one, and I said, Michael, you know your class is all white, and he was like, Melissa, well, your class is all black. So I was like, yes. And I said, we have to do something about that because I want my students to understand other races and cultures, right? So that happened 7 years ago. And we used Empatico, and unfortunately, Empatico is not around. They end up ending that platform in May. But we used Empatico to connect our classrooms. And we end up partnering with pen pals, and they would exchange letters and gifts. And then they would read books based off of social justice themes. And as we dived into that work, we felt that it was important to bring in the National Civil Rights Museum and Little Rock Central High School National Park. So they would talk to those students, our little ones, about those difficult conversations about integration and segregation. But what I realized that as they got to be friends, it wasn't about race. They didn't talk about that. It was like, what do you like about your friend? Or what do you notice? They would talk about, well, my friend likes Barbie dolls, or my friend likes the color pink, right? And so what I thought that would change them was actually changing us, right? And so we wanted to equip them with more. And so we said, what type of project would you like to lead to make changes in the world? And they said, we want to come up with a march because, you know, that's what Dr. King and some of the people with Little Rock Nine. And so we started a kindness march. And so at first we had to do that first within our classrooms. Let's see what that would look like. What do you want to see in the world? So they began to put things like love, be kindness, so that empathy came in. And after that, we saw, hi, this is powerful. Then we worked within our schools and our districts, and we led a much larger march. And then I said, okay, let's go to the National Civil Rights Museum on my day off, right? Which, you know, we don't do that. So on my day off, I come with the kids and they had their signs on, and then the security said, wait a minute, you can't protest on these grounds. Because as teachers, we have to take risks, be bold, and I was like, okay, I didn't ask for permission, but they so cute. And so, like, you can't lock us up. So they end up letting us skip the line, going to the museum, but we couldn't hold it by signs, but we could hold it inside the museum. And the museum had taken pictures, and those pictures were shown everywhere, right? And so then I called. I said, let me do the right thing. I said, can we lead a kindness march? My students want to lead one to make a difference. And so we have done that for 3 years. And then when COVID happened, we said, how can we bring in global, make this more global? And so then we started a peace march, and where people all over the world joined us on the same date. And so we began to be one band making one sound. And so my kids thought they were activists. And I said, you are activists. You are making a change. And let me say, they was afraid. Their first march at the National Civil Rights Museum, and some of them cried, but I said, hey, lock arms like Coretta and Martin. And they did, and when the people cheered them on, they saw that they could make a difference.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like you're addressing these global issues, right? So how do we navigate differences between people, conflict, even climate change you mentioned. And I think of the foundation, right, that you're building for our students, because it's easy to think, okay, one individual, right, you're gonna make these choices, you're gonna make a plan, this is how you're gonna change things. And yet, at the foundation of this, you're talking a lot about community, of people coming and getting to know each other. Amanda Holmes and Norma Gonzalez out of the University of Arizona write a lot about indigenous pedagogies, and this is what they said. Relationality, or coming to know oneself through the contextual constellation of relationships, is at the foundation of this. And so I really appreciate how you're talking about how that community building, that relationship to get to know each other, is really at the foundation of becoming change makers. And Ivana, you have a similar example, how at the foundation of creating change, your students really came together through seeing each other, different perspectives.
And, so she's working with second graders, and mine are everywhere from 14 to 21. They're just amazing group, a big group. But usually what we do a lot of dialogues, and I'm listening, I'm observing. Those kids come with a lot of trauma and everything else, but the rich experiences. And then it came up last year that they saw how being different is not a good thing. It's high school, and I don't know who is teaching here high school, but they want to just fit in. Middle school, high school kids, they just want to fit in. They want to just look the same and do the same things. And then we just encouraged that talk. And I said, so we came up with that, don't be afraid to be different, that's your superpower. And just kind of convincing them, like affirmation every day. And then through the dialogue, they actually saw that they have so much to offer, not just to the school community, but the whole community. They wanted to design a T-shirt, they did. So, and then they actually sold those T-shirts at school and community. They started working with special education kids, especially they made an inclusion week amazing. But the thing is, how we started after those dialogues, I actually wanted them to go and look inside. I wanted them to know that they need to know who they are. I have kids who just came, got off the airplane, and I have some they've been here for 6-7 years. And they're already kind of getting away from the culture, identity, and language because they want to be the same as others in a very white community. So the thing is, we talked about identity. We did all kinds of things saying how special you are. We did projects on that. And then we got together and they actually just shared affirmations and the things that they're good at. These are my assets I'm bringing to. I'm so proud of it. So they've done a lot of things like that, but the thing is, they also were invited by a senior class, comp class, to do ethnographic interviews. So all of these seniors, or maybe a class of 500, interviewed these students, and they found out more about it. And then they start building that empathy, and then they were their window to the world. And then now, those other kids got to that self-discovery too, by writing those stories. And then they decided to talk about why being different is a problem, not just at the school, but in the community and the world, and our country, unfortunately. And they had the longest table. They came up with really good questions, level 3 questions, English teachers. And then
what are level 3 questions,
level 3
Ivana?
questions,
Help us out.
absolutely. And then they sat down with all of the juniors, because those are the kids who are actually concentrating on American literature and American history. And they had the dialogue. And you know what's the most important thing? It was not my idea. I mean, I was just there. I started an ignite little fire within them, and they just took it over. Oh, Mr. Dorich, we can do this, and we can do this. Like, oh, hello, just that. And then actually they ended up doing the PD for the whole district. I didn't do much. I knew their stories, and they shared their stories, and guess what? You know, after that, every time you take a PD, you have to do the survey reflection. We got 15 out of 10. Because you know why? They don't want to listen to me. They want to listen to them. And why? Because those kids were not afraid to tell the truth, and they told how it is and what it is, and they actually brought all of the perspectives together. And that was just amazing. So igniting the fire, having them know who, because sometimes even as adults, we are like, okay, who am I? Because identity changes as we go, and it's just like, you just start little spark, and then it just goes globally. And then they went into the community and did all kinds of projects. They're right now teaching English to new Americans, refugees, every Monday night. Did it start from me? No, it was all of them. I learned so much from them that it's just like unbelievable. I have to actually pay them because I learned so much from them. So anyway.
Well, and I think that's such an important concept, right? That the knowledge lives within our students, and they have so much to give back to us if we can just facilitate and empower them to do these things. And I love a quote from James Baldwin. He says, "Knows when you came. If you know where you came from, there's really no limit to where you can go." And I think at the root of that community building, right, is knowing ourselves first, right? Melissa, you said we start by changing ourselves first. And I love this concept, right, of different together, and how when we value each individual, when we provide opportunities for our students to get to know themselves deeply, as they're trying to navigate this world, right? They're trying to fit in, they're trying to figure out who they are, but when they can be comfortable in their own skin, and they understand who they are and what they value about themselves, and they have that confidence, they're able, right, to see each other and then have the bravery and the courage to speak up. Speaking up is not easy. So when we talk about student voice, right, and centering what our students bring, the needs of our community, and these global issues that are present, right, in each of our contexts, how do you help your students just bring out their voice? How do we allow them to do that, right? To do that spark that you said, that they have ideas, they see things that are not fair, whether they're second graders or high schoolers. What are things that help you bring that student voice to the classroom?
Student voice is definitely important, and they have to understand that you are allowing them to have a voice, right? And I think that's important, because sometimes children can be in teacher classroom, it's like it's all about me, right? Not about you. And so you have to make them comfortable in sharing their voices, not only with their peers, but with me. And so what I do, I first model that for them, because I do work with little ones. And so I stand up day one. I feel like Debbie Allen, if you all remember Fame. She would stand up, you're gonna work, right? And so I tell them who I am as a teacher, right? I am a Black woman. I was raised in this community. I went to this school that's close by. And I love this community. And so when I see something wrong, Dr. Collins takes action. So what does that look like for me? I may go to the board meetings. I may go to city council and talk about things. And right now, with so many things coming up, political issues, and talking about book bans and all of those things. And so Nicholas Smith, wasn't he awesome? Right, so I saw him at the Ruby Bridges reading day. And my class got to march there, because what I've taught them is, here I am, they may ban books, but they can't ban Ruby Bridges. So we're here to celebrate her. And what does that look like? Them making a difference. And so that's a way of giving them a voice, celebrating books on Ruby Bridges Reading Day, right? And so then I give them the opportunity to have a voice in the classroom. So when I have them doing different things, I give them that platform. My classroom is like a center stage. I wish I had a stage in my classroom. Need to work on it. Where they can talk about issues. So here we are, we're talking about homelessness. And so I'm gonna say this, we talk about experiences, right? And so we have to bring those experiences back to our classroom. So being in LA, I notice a lot of homeless people, and so I may bring that to my classroom. That's an example. Okay, then I say, hey, I pass around a microphone. I have this oversized mic to motivate them, right? So they're talking about, I said, how can we support them? Oh, they need a house. Okay, well, if they don't have money, what can we do? And so then I start reading different articles and letting them see me go through the research and empower them more to talk and come up with solutions, because we want solutions, our students to be solution oriented. So I tell them, hey, you can have these problems, but you need to come up with some solutions. How can you make changes? So then we start building tiny houses, and I let them present it. But once they present to the class, they say, oh, you're the expert. Now we're gonna take it out into the school community. And so we're putting things up in the walls. They're going inside the classrooms, and they're talking about what they're doing, and that empowers them. And then they wanna do something else. So even before the kindness march, I said, you're the kindness fairies. We're gonna go surprise somebody, put a note on their desk, and we all tiptoeing in the classroom, putting those messages, and we'll come back and they see what's happening. So that's the way to give voices. So not just being vocal, because sometimes we think, hey, you just need to talk, but sometimes it can be other actions that you take to make sure that people know that you have a voice. So I'm gonna say this, you gotta give them an opportunity to share out. Can't keep it in. As she talked about the heart, I tell people the right messengers are the teachers. How many teachers in here? You are the right messengers. Students are the right messengers, and they give you an opportunity to tug on those heartstrings a little bit more on things that you want to see within your community and impacting global changes as well.
I appreciate, sorry, how you're not just modeling, but also walking them through practicing this before they even go outside your classroom, right? So you start slow in your class, they're practicing this, and now they're sharing it with their community, whether that's their school or their larger issues. I know you both have talked about how you take these approaches to identifying problems. I think that's something fairly easy, right? If you're watching the news, if you're following people, if you're talking to people, it's really easy to identify issues and problems in our communities. And yet you're moving them towards solution-oriented. And I know, Ivana, you've talked about how using like the United Nations Sustainable Goals help you get students to that place of solution finding. Can you share maybe a little bit about that?
Being brave is hard. And being brave as a teacher is hard. And it's very hard, and I'm so sorry, but like I've lived in two cultures. And in this culture, especially in Midwest where I come from, people don't want to be vulnerable. And it's so important for the teachers to be vulnerable. Because that shows you and gives that portrait of you as a human being. My teacher is not actually that teacher. She doesn't sleep in school. She actually has a life, or he has a life, and he's a human being, you know. And then when you start with like sustainable goals, all human rights, that we actually did many debates on that, and it was really difficult because they can't decide what's what. But I do think that they've figured out that telling the truth is really important. And that they need to build that resilience, you know. And I do think that cultivating empathy and building resilience among them is actually our community responsibility. It's about, you know, just not as an educator, but as a whole community. Because the world we live now, it's beautiful, but that does have a lot of issues. And those kids need to be more empathetic and resilient. And I think this is where it comes that work that we did with different levels of grade levels, because my students are the oldest and we talked about global issues, and then we found actually they decided, and guess what? It didn't happen in the ELD class. It happened in biology class that I co-teach with, co-teach. And the thing is, they figured out that the Dasani water really smells bad. Then talking about the Dasani water, suddenly they start talking about, Ethiopia, Kenya, Africa, and Africa's issue of water. Then they talked about Nepali refugee camp, how every day they had to get up in the morning, stand in the line to get to the water, and all kinds of mishaps happen during that, And so talking, and we, it just started, like I said, with the sentence of Dasani, it really smells bad and tastes bad. And then they started like, oh, can we just check? Let's just and then they had they included also the younger kids, and they all did it together, like a PAL thing with the fourth grade, the pH checking of the water. They bought the most expensive, like Fiji and Smart Water, Dasani, all of those, and then our water from the tap. What do you think, which one was the best? Tap water. Tap water, actually, my communities are known for really good quality of water, but tap water. So, guess what? They started, making signs, and then they went and, educated their family, members, because they do a lot of, cultural things, and do not buy water at Sam's anymore. This is good, you just have to have so and I know that's just a one example how it just started. Was it in my standards and benchmarks? Kind of. Exploring discovery. But what was the most powerful thing? They started it. They did experiment? Did they connect with the younger kids? Did they connect with the community? That they went and became a messenger? Do not buy the water. Save money. And do this. So once again, it's just that, one word kind of comes to my mind, and Melissa was recently in South Africa, but it's Ubuntu. And I think that's what my kids are teaching me. I am because we are. It's never I, it's always us. That's very rarely to be seen among the teenagers. But I do think that Ubuntu feeling, philosophy, mindset would take us way more. And we can be different together if we have that Ubuntu.
That's beautiful. And it just makes me think of how many of our communities have that as a value, right? I know in Dakota we talk about all my relatives, right? So that we have that mindset of what's good for other people is also good for ourselves. And I'm wondering if we can talk maybe about a little bit more practical aspects on how do we make this happen, right? So we talked about how we center community, how we have our student voice be the center that guides a lot of these things. When I taught ethnic studies, we use youth participatory action research as a model to have our students identify a problem, who's in our community, if we're finding a solution, right, who do we go talk to, who do we need to present, and those pieces. But what impresses me about that is that our students are so good, right? I find these issues that are impactful and that make a difference for themselves. I know one of the issues one of my students identified was just the language that people used at the high school to treat each other. And they thought that it was an issue, right? If the language was denigrating, if it was sexist language, or and they were really looking at issues of gender in that sense. But they had a process, right? They made surveys to collect input from other people. What were their experiences? What's going on in our classroom? And I mean in our school, because sometimes we have these ideas, but when we empower our students to take the next step, to do the research, to find out what's happening, what are other students saying, what are we looking at, what are solutions, what I've seen is just a transformation in themselves to understand that they actually have power to use their voice, to find the facts, to find solutions, and then to talk to administrators or school leaders about what are things that can be put in place to make things better in their community. So I'm wondering, what are some of those practical things that you do in your classroom to move them from finding issues to getting to a solution?
Get into a solution. You definitely got to go through the experience, right? To
Go through the experience
get to
yourself.
the solution
Yeah.
to myself with the students. So some practical things that I've done to help them understand at such a young age is to look at different problems that have already occurred and what kind of solutions helped with their problem to make it relevant to them, and so they have purpose. And so when I think about, there's so many things that I've done that I want to share to make practical. So I make sure that they can share out as well, that they write, that they use social media, where they can engage others. Talking about a situation with Tyree Nichols and how you went into the curriculum. So here, I asked my kids about this situation, like, how many of you know what's going on right now, right? And so a lot of them said yes. And so then I'm thinking about, how could I use the curriculum to talk to them to come up with that, to make it practical? So it talked about the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. And then I use art. So I like using art like role playing, dancing. And so I remember surprising them by bringing in a dancer. They didn't know that it was coming in. And she danced to Change Is Gonna Come, one of the songs that were at Tyree Nichols' funeral. And how many of you are aware of what happened in Memphis with Tyree Nichols, right? So bringing that in, and then I had them role play up with situations that happened to them personally at home. And some of them would be like, well, I'm trying to do my homework, and my sister had a problem with it. So I wrote some of that in a role play situation. And then I asked them to think about, draw a picture, what do you want to see in the world? How can you make it better to make it more practical to them? And then we did a video, and that video was shared out. And then they were able to get responses. They could read the responses of how people saw how these little ones were coming up with these solutions. And so I think it's very important to think about, help them think about ways to engage, but also let them see how people engage with them. And social media, articles, blog posts is definitely a good way to do that with young students.
That interdisciplinary approach is really important for our students, and I love how you're integrating the arts and just even multimedia. And one of the things that I love about this work that you're sharing is that our students are not just learning to be change makers, but they're also learning to be what I call content producers, right? They're just not consumers of information, but how can they get their message out? And there's so many skills that can be applied throughout their life when they learn to do that. What are your thoughts, Ivana, on this?
Well, we have a really dear friend in Texas. Her name is Shelly Jeffrey, and she just did a podcast on Power Up, and she said, we don't teach lessons, we teach experiences. And when we do that, then it sticks with us. Those are the Velcros we build with our students and with any human being. If we tell you the story with whatever we're talking about, you'll remember more than others, way. So in my classroom, we always start with generated questions and things that we see that is an issue or problem. And then we have this essential question that becomes kind of a theme, overarching theme. And believe we do a lot of standard learning too with that, because they need to really work on language too. But the thing is also that purpose and choice. I'm there, but what we're doing is like, what is the purpose of this? And then I give them choices. And then mine is based on project-based learning, I would say, because I want to, like we always want a product at the end. Some kind of that, it will move the needle in a way that it will change something. So we are solution focused. So what can we do at the end? How, what you learned and what you did is going to change somebody. Sometimes, I learned this thing with them, they told me that they are just planting a seed in somebody's head. Sometimes it's just enough to plant a seed, because to be honest with you, sometimes I get frustrated and I show that in front of them, like, oh my gosh, these people. And then they would like, mantra, Mrs. Todorovich, it's just planting a seed. It will grow, believe us. So anyway, so that's how we do it with the project-based learning. We kind of planting the seed. So this 1 year, we had a lot of them struggle with identity and culture and even forgetting language. I had this group of kids who have been, in the United States for a long time, and then sometimes they cannot even understand their own parents. And there's a lot of like gap that is kind of growing and growing between them. So we just started exploring that. What is the definition of home? What is the language? Who is your tribe? Type of a thing. So what we do a lot of, reading, but also listening. TED Talks are there are some amazing ones on that just starts kind of planting these seeds in their heads. And then Socratic seminars. And from that, they decided that actually they want to empower younger learners. And some of them, again, back to that choice. And some of them, they just wanted to empower teachers. And it was their choice. So some of them, what they did, they wrote stories about the life in Africa. Life in Nepal, life in China, life in, wherever they come from. And then what they did, because those kids, Head Start kids and little elementary kids who are from those cultures, they didn't, of course, they don't know how to read in that language. So what they did, they actually recorded their stories in that language. And they got together and they listened to them, and then those kids could always listen to those stories. Just to say, message, preserving your language will preserve you, because without language, you don't really lose your identity and culture. Other group didn't want to do that. They wanted to actually empower the teacher. And what they did short movies that were actually shown in our PDs across the district. And they talked about myths and misconceptions about multilingual learners. They talked about the best ways, and they did it like with a song. They did it with like the rhythm, whatever they wanted to choose. And they were so powerful, actually. That was just, I actually had one student, and he's actually in the student council and president of our club. He actually wanted to thank the teachers. And so I still have those videos, and they will stay. And those videos impacted other teachers. And then the stories actually helped the little kids understand that this is me, this is who I am. And I need to learn the language. I need to be there. And now our next project with the parents, because some of the parents who, they have a hard time understanding how the both languages are amazing, not just English, because your child will actually know English and live in America forever, but you also have to preserve the other, because really language is so connected. So that was what we did 1 year. But always that essential question comes from them. Then we, do a lot of dialogue, not me, but them. And then they decided on project-based learning that will influence not just our school, our classroom, but outside of the classroom walls.
Thank you.
And then I think it's important too to add about the partnerships. Who can be your potential partners? Because I think sometimes as teachers we feel like we have to be the expert of everything, and we're not. I'm not. And so you can think about how you can use Smithsonian. Like I use the National Civil Rights Museum, Little Rock Central High School, National Park, to bring that. Also, I bring in experts, people, role models who look like my students, to spark that curiosity and inspire them to go into that field, because I believe seeing is believing. And so thinking about who your students are in that classroom that you teach, and thinking how you can motivate them by seeing other experts that look like them, right, as well. That's important. And then you want to think about how you're going to measure their success. So we hate talking about assessments, but, but we do need to think about ways, what that looks like. What do we want that outcome to be for our students? And we need to involve them in that outcome. And how are you going to present that information, right? Is it going out into a field experience? Like I took my kids to the National Civil Rights Museum, but I've taken them to other places. They've been to Little Rock Central High School. And don't be afraid to ask when I get off the call with anybody, do you have some funds? Do you have some funds, some resources? Because there are limited resources. And when you work in a Title I school, I have big hopes and dreams with little funds. And so, but I do let them know what I'm doing. So that's important, that you let them know who your students are, what you want to bring to the table, how you want them to be change makers and engage in their work.
So I know we'll have time for questions in just a minute, but I'm wondering if you can just share something quickly. This job can be hard, and school can be hard for our students, and yet as I hear your stories, I can't help but feel the joy and just reward, the feeling of being rewarded through this work. Goldie Mohammed usually says, right, joy, it's hard to have joy within oppressions and injustice. And yet, when I hear what your students are doing, I can't help but feel the joy that comes from that work. So I'm wondering if you can maybe just quickly into one sentence, how does that impact in your community, bring that joy, either for you or within the classroom? I know we have to move for questions.
That's a good question. And you said one sentence. So, being in Memphis, where the crime rate is high among our youth and poverty is at an all-time high, when they see my babies, and I call them my babies and they belong to me, I'm their forever teacher, as I tell them, it makes my community proud. And it makes them to continue to believe in education. It makes me believe in education. And if they can see these little ones make a difference, so can all of us. We can all bring joy to our community.
I would say one sentence. Whew.
I know it's hard. I probably said about 10.
Yeah. I would say getting your neighbors, getting to know your neighbors will open your hearts to a change, and it will grow that seed of hope for humanity. One
So
sentence.
powerful. Yes, I love this. I just love how we're addressing hard topics, and yet there's so much joy in just finding the humanity as we see each other, and just inspiring not just the learners, but I think also the adults as we come together to do this work. So thank you for sharing your experiences. And I know we have some time for questions from the audience, if anybody has some questions. And I think there's some microphones on both sides, so we could start over here.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I had a question about how does community-based learning and experiential learning play a role in building a student's sense of belonging within the classroom, and thus the ability to see oneself within the field, specifically for students who have been marginalized within fields such as STEM or other fields that they have historically not been represented within?
Oh, I want to take from the STEM perspective, and then I let her. I'm passionate about STEM. And so with my little ones, my second graders, I want to say 15 years ago, I started having my students wear lab coats during inquiry-based learning. And I I really was doing that to plant that seed of hope so they can see themselves being in any field, whatever they want it to be. And I'm trying not to get emotional. And years later, they started coming back. Dr. Collins, I earned a white coat.
Yeah.
Can I share this experience with your students? And I'm thinking, wow. And then about 7 years ago, I said, okay. I started a white coat ceremony. And that white coat ceremony was led by Black and brown professionals that represented my students. And so they could see themselves, right? And the STEM professionals would pen and coat the students. And when they got up, and I'm looking at them just like this in their white coat their first year, and I'm like, seeing is believing. And so, and then they would engage in monthly activities and field experience. So they would be a part of a club, the Future Leaders of STEM. And I thought about it, I said, okay, this still is just a selective group. And so how can I empower the whole? And so as teachers, when you start seeing, first the magic has to happen in the classroom. That's your first center stage. And then you go beyond the classroom. And so, and then it's like you get on a ride, right? You know, I'm scared of roller coasters, but it's a thrill, right? And you can say, I can do this again. I can do this again. I can get on a bigger ride, right? And so then I started thinking about ways, how can I bring it to my school? And so I started doing STEM Fest, and then we would do virtual opportunities where they could see themselves. And it's working, because first when you ask kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? They may say firefighters, police officer, and that's okay, right? But when you start hearing, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a technologist, design social media components or whatever, I don't know all those names they use, but when working with technology and helping with that digital divide, you know the power of that white coat and what it means that those STEM professionals enter my school building for those students. And so that's a way of belonging, right? And so through project-based learning, first of all, you gotta let kids understand their community, right? And I got on my dad recently. You didn't take me to Graceland. You didn't take me to the Stack Museum. You took me to Florida and everywhere else, but not my own community. And my parents are guilty of it as well. And so when I start thinking about, these are the things in my community, and I'm surveying, have you been there? Have you been in this place? And the kids are saying no, and so then it's my opportunity to take them to those places. And then once they learn their community, then they can be more solution oriented. Like, what is going on and how can you come up with a solution on to make it better? So it's potholes in the street. We notice all those potholes, so what are we gonna do about it? So they may say they wanna write it to the council. So those are things that you can do to help students feel like they belong and how they can make a difference for their communities, because that's where it has to happen first before it can happen globally. And we all have the same issues worldwide. I've been there to South Africa. We're talking about STEM, we're talking about education, we're talking about poverty, peace, and what does that look like? And so it's easy to bring that context back to your classroom. And recently about the South Africa, I brought in an expert, a pilot. I said, play this role with me. I want you to pretend that my kids, we're going to South Africa. We're gonna let them use their imagination. And I brought in one of my students who was a flight attendant. And so they had these experts giving them this real world experience, going to the market, and I had somebody from South Africa talk about the market, and we danced in the classroom. And then I said, oh, we gonna get off the plane, you're gonna receive your stamp from the pilot, we're going back, we're going to South Africa, now we at the market, you're looking at your instruments that I got from all over the world when I exposed them to, and then they created instruments using recyclable items, thinking about what I saw in South Africa. And so sometimes when we go out of town, and we experience things, we need to make sure, think about ways that we can bring that to our students. We cannot be selfish in this work. It is urgent work, and education is definitely the key to moving our country forward.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
All right, I'm looking at the time, so we'll try to go quickly. So,
Yeah, I'll try to be super quick. So I currently work at Girl Scouts Nation's Capital as a teen programming specialist. This is important to the story because half of my job is literally encouraging Girl Scouts to accomplish what's called a Gold Award, which is essentially a change-making award within their community. It's a singular award. They have to do like 80 hours worth of work. And what I run into consistently, because they're teenagers, obviously, is that they just feel so overwhelmed by like how many problems there are to solve. And like to the point where they can't like figure out what they want to accomplish or like what's important to them, or they have so many passions, how do I narrow it? It's like, what's your advice to like, how do I encourage them to sort of narrow in, because they have such big ideas. These teenagers see so many things these days, and like it's so hard to like find their narrow space. So like, how do they figure it out?
It happened to me too, because like, when we work with those big kids, that's what happens. They have so many ideas, and then they're hesitant and this and that. So what I'm just gonna tell you what I did in my classroom. So we wrote them all on the like cards, we made cards of them, and then I split them in like 5-6 groups, and they were debating at each group, what about the issue? So what they needed to do, they had to rank them 1 through 10. And then once they ranked, then we took the 3, and then we got the whole group ranking. And then they were, and why is this? It's very empowering because they're actually talking, they're dialoguing, and every single issue is important.
Yeah.
But there's something that we need to focus. And then you're teaching them actually life skills, because when they get to be the people in charge or doing the work, they would need to know those kind of problem solving, critical thinking things. And then we got to the top one. Okay, this is the one that actually starts here in our small community, and it's problem here and problem here and problem here. Let's start with this. And this is what's close to our hearts too. Sometimes, so I don't know, like, if that help you.
No, it definitely does.
But I do think that was like, you should, like, I actually recorded dialogues. It was like, oh, dear God. And then they actually came to a solution. And then it's like, okay, if we have time, we'll take care of second and third. Because and then there's that thing, if you grab this way, nothing's going to be accomplished.
Absolutely.
So
Thank
I
you
don't
so
know.
much.
That's a little trick that I did, because there's a lot of things that we need to think
I agree.
about.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
thanks, Ivana. And I think as the adults, facilitating with young people is also being able to bring in the realistic pieces, right, that we can accomplish, and the capacity that we have. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for your comments. I'm Debbie Fink, and I run an evidence-based disability inclusion program called Just Say Hi, making a commitment to disability inclusion. And Ivana, you referenced how your students worked with special ed students, and knowing that the Department of Education has identified that 50% of students reporting bullying and harassment are students with IEPs or 504 plans, and also that 17% of the student body nationwide has 504 plans or IEPs, so it's very disproportionate. And in terms of the sense of belonging, I'm wondering what your perspectives are in terms of disability inclusion and at high school level, very much engaging students, and the intersectionality between disability and other aspects. Like, can you address that?
I think it's recognizing being different.
I was just going to say, we're almost out of time, so maybe you can wrap quickly, and then we can continue the conversation.
Yeah,
on
if you
stage.
could answer just very quickly, it's an important question, but maybe if you could hang back afterwards too, but, so just really quick responses from each of you, please.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think recognizing being different, but the strengths. So, there's so much that we've done with our special ed, but one thing I'm just going to tell you, they came up together with a poster around the school. Don't tolerate me, respect me.
Beautiful. That's a great way to end.
Let's give them a round of applause, and maybe, yes, thank you so much to our state teachers of the year. Yes, thank you so much.